Hello, everyone. Hopefully, y'all can see me. This is my first ever live broadcast. Hopefully, y'all can see me. This is my first ever live broadcast. Hopefully, y'all can see me. This is my first ever live broadcast. Hopefully, y'all can see me. This is my first ever live broadcast. Sorry about that. It was viewing. It was relaying off of another link I had opened up. So I'm going to take questions. Uh, Prefer questions about clues, whether there are clues in the book, clues that Forrest has said out loud, or if he written them in an interview. Uh, if there's a question about somebody wants some clarification on something, like K Pro, was told that I dug that hole with a backhoe, and we didn't. It was all hand dug. There was never no machines over there. Questions along this line. Uh, yeah. So the reason I'm doing this is I'm not trying to convince everybody that my spot is right and theirs is wrong. What I'm trying to do is, unfortunately, the feds are blocking my quest. Uh, I got caught digging at my spot. I have more than enough evidence to continue the dig, but they refuse to do so. They're more on a witch hunt to see if they can't pin some federal charge on me for something at this point. I've already got state charges. I pled guilty. I paid my fines. Uh, but it's hard to know where the chest is and then have people die. This has been bugging me pretty hard for the last 5 years because I'm trying to dig this up, and people were dying in the process, and it played on me emotionally. To the point to where I even called the state police to turn myself in uh, and let them know where it was at, just so that we put an end to it, so people would quit dying. And then they didn't take me serious. They never returned my phone calls. They just blew me off. Uh, so I had no choice but to finish the dig to try to end this whole thing. Um, I guess with that all said, I'll take some questions.
First question
You got to bear with me.
is, what did you hear from Forrest about tipping your toe in the water?
Okay, K Pro asked about what did I hear from Forrest about tipping your toe in the water. Uh, I had a series of emails from Forrest and myself back and forth after I met him at the book signing, and I gave him my note. And I don't know who all saw that video. It was on Gypsy's Kiss, where Forrest, after I hand him a note, he reads it and he looks at me and says, "You're going to jail." And I look back at him. I said, "You're going with me." And he said something about playing Canascus or something together. But I think it was bothering Forrest that I had my warm water halts backwards, because I was going to. I was thinking Willow Creek was the warm water because of the San Juan water project, where they actually drilled holes through the mountain to siphon water from some of the other rivers down into the Santa Fe, Albuquerque area. So I was thinking, as it came through that mountain, ground temperature 50 degrees or whatever it is. So I think this was bothering Forrest a lot, because he kept saying that in order to find it, you had to have the right clue right. And I had the right spot right, but I had my rivers backwards. It was actually the Chama River that turned out to be the warm body of water, and Willow Creek is freezing cold. And what Forrest emailed me was to go back and rethink warm water halts, and to dip my toe into Willow Creek, and I would find out how cold or how warm it wasn't. And so I did that, and I took a photo of it. I don't have the photo with me, but I literally stuck my foot in water, and it's freezing cold. But before that, I was in the Chama, and I was going down the Chama River, and there was a family that was there, and I asked them, is this typical for rivers around here to be this warm? And they're like, no. They're like, usually they're all freezing cold, and that this was the only one that they knew of that was that warm. And if you go down to where Willow Creek comes in, not only can you feel a physical temperature difference between the waters, but you can see it. Willow Creek's like a cloudy colored green, and Chama's clear, and you can literally see where the Chama is letting Willow Creek take charge of the river, and it kind of holds off. And right there, with the volume of waters coming into Willow Creek, it takes over the Chama, and it literally takes the warm water from the Chama and turns it cold. So, excuse me. So from right there at Willow Creek down, the Chama is now freezing cold. From Willow Creek up, definitely during the summer months, the Chama River is warm. Not bathtub warm, but close. It's comfortable. It was a nice walk down through the canyon there in the river. So definitely, Forrest wanted me to know that I had that backwards. So once I emailed him the correct first clue, then he quit sending emails to me. So apparently he was pleased with what I had discovered or rediscovered or got clarified, however you want to look at it. And that's how it came about with the warm water, with my toe in the water. And of course, that's the first clue at Heron Lake, although it has nothing to do with the dam. It has everything to do with Willow Creek and the Chama River. The Chama River holding is where warm water halts. So we'll look at the next question. Go ahead and read it to me.
You think you've been given private hints, secret hints?
From K-Pro. Yeah, this one.
Yep.
K-Pro asked if I was given private hints, secret hints. I mean, if he has not told other people other than K-Pro about dipping their toe into the water, I would say that was a private hint that wasn't made public. I guess, but I didn't know that at the time, but apparently K-Pro's was a thing. So I guess quite a few people knew about it that I didn't know about. But to answer that, I'd have to say yes. There's something else that he told me that I'm not telling nobody else. I don't know if I want to call it a super clue or a clue, but it's definitely confirmation of something. And then, but that's I want to leave that as that. Okay. Any other questions? Oh, K-Pro wants me to tell the what Forrest told me, but I'm not going to do that to Forrest. So Forrest wants that out for everybody. I'll let him tell everybody. It doesn't do anything one where, well, it confirms one clue for me only because I already knew what the clue was. If I didn't know what that clue was, it would help a little bit, I guess. It would help some people. There's some people on that clue that are off, and that would be clarification for them. But for most of us, it would just be, oh yeah, that's what I figured. So that's about as close as I'm going to be able to get to that one. K-Pro wants to know, do you know of other searchers or information about your location, like the 200-footer? I don't know who the 200-footer is. Thinking it might be Dick Cheney. But I don't know. That's just a guess. But I'm the 12-footer guy. All right. Yeah. Anybody have any questions about the clues? I'll run through what the 9 9 clues are: what does my family think about the chase in your solve? Uh, my wife hates the chase. It took a lot of time away from her, and it cost me a lot of money. So it's not her favorite subject in the world, that's for sure. Uh, my son, he's all for it till I can't say because I would be implicating other people. So that uh, most of my family thinks it's cool. Some think that I'm right, some thinks that I'm wrong, and that's fine. So I don't have a bunch of people just blowing smoke up my butt. I get asked hard questions all the time from family and friends. Uh, so yeah, I mean, it's a mix, I guess.
Robert, why don't you walk through your answers to the 9 clues?
All right, Robert Selinsky. I hope I said that right, Robert. If not, I apologize. Okay, the first water is warm water halts. Is the Chama River halting to Willow Creek? In the canyon down is the Chama Canyon. It's right, it's right there. The Chama River goes through it. Robert said I got it right, so that's awesome. So you go down the canyon. I'm trying to remember the poem. I don't have a copy of it. My memory isn't the best anymore because of my medical condition. So just bear with me. If I get stuck, I'll get unstuck. So it's the beginning where warm water halts. Take it in the canyon down, which is Chama Canyon. Put in below the home of the Brown. The key there is a lot of people focus on the home of the Brown, and I in my solve it's brown trout because the Chama River is just famous for its trout fishing. At the Stonehouse Lodge, it's right there. They have the state record hanging on the wall, so that's pretty cool. And if you ever go there and talk to Miriam, she loves to talk about that stuff. So, any of you guys ever in that area, go up to the Stonehouse Lodge. If it's during the summer, the cafe will be open, and see if Miriam's there. She's an old sweetheart of a lady, and yeah, so she's one of my favorite parts of being there when I'm there. But recently, I was told of another possible home of the Brown. Hold on, I got something. Looks like somebody's trying to hack me or something because my computer is going crazy. Hopefully we're all there. Somebody give me a comment, say that we're okay. Are we still live? Okay, Pro, can you give me an okay? Okay, thanks. My computer went completely crazy there for a second. So I'm not going to divulge what that is, which is a really good one. I liked it. But it still works. It doesn't change anything with my solve, whether it's home of Brown or if it's this other home of Brown. They both work. It doesn't change anything really. So, which is kind of surprising, but that's the way it is. So I believe it's below where the brown trout is before you go into Lake Alvado. So it says put in. I've been reading on Terry Scant some of the other stuff where Forrest says that there's not too many treasures that's in on the key word, and I do believe that the key word is put in because we get lost on the home of the Brown, but put in's the important part. We're putting something in, and I seen where a searcher had posted about sailing, about boats and stuff recently, and it was a definition from someplace where it's definitely the phrase put in is about putting boats in, and that's what I figured out once I had my boots on the ground there, that heavy loads and water high was boats, and Lake Alvado was the water high, and you put the boats in because right there where the Chama ends coming into Lake Alvado, there's a gigantic boat ramp, and and when I was there and I realized that loads was plural and it was more than one, that's when everything clicked together. It wasn't my solve that I had. It was just like Forrest said. Once you get there and you start putting the clues in a row, they'll just come up. They'll just show themselves, and it's basically what it did. I mean, once I realized that heavy loads was plural, I told my son that I guaranteed him 100% we were on the right stream. At that point, Lake Alvado is drained down low, so there's a little stream, a little brook that goes right next to the boat ramp. If the lake was full, the lake would actually go up past the boat ramp some, and you would never know there's a stream there. Never. When you're driving down the road, it just looks like that was made that like a road runoff for the water. So I followed this thing up, and of course, it's only like a 6 to 8 inches wide and maybe a foot deep in spots. Well, there's some spots it's a little bit bigger, but to the most part, it's just a little brook. It's about like that. And then, of course, you're not going to paddle up that. So that's your, paddle up your creek. And then as I'm walking up the creek's coming to its beginning or end, however you want to look at it. And then that plays into your quest is ever drawing nigh, which is a double meaning, is that you're coming to the beginning of the creek and that you're coming to the end of the chase because you're getting close to the blaze. So we're walking up the stream, and when we drove down, everything just looked flat. You would never know that there was a secret indent in the ground, a depression. And I'm walking up this creek, and my brother said to me, I'm going to go get the car. He goes, this creek's coming to an end because it's getting into a marshy area. And I'm like, well, Forrest said people's been within 500 feet of it. So if I'm within 500 feet of that road, I'm still walking this creek. I said, when this creek gets 500 feet past that road or away from it, then I'll stop. And then the next thing I know, I'm walking up to this marshy area, but you can still see where the water, was flowing. I mean, it wasn't like rapids or anything. I mean, you had to look. And I followed it. And then next thing I know, I'm in this depression. It's about 12 to 14 feet high. And I'm only 200 feet from the road. And then there's this gigantic boulder. And then you had to get to that gigantic boulder and look straight to the left to see the blaze. Because he had put sage bushes the whole way around the blaze. So like it's on a steep hill like this. And then like 3/4 of the way down is where the blaze was. And then he had the sage brush just kind of like this around it. There was none anywhere else in this area, clear out to this area. Now there's sage up on top. And there's some sage, a little bit of sage at the bottom, but there wasn't very much sage on the steep sideness of the hill. But right there where the blaze was, there was sage that was planted completely around it. And the only way that you could see the blaze was if you were standing right there at that rock looking straight at it. Then you knew at that point in time that you had found the blaze, because like he said, once you're there, you'll know it. And of course, it was a long, I don't know who all remembers the picture waiting for me to come live, but that's the blaze. That stump that was on the top was rolled up there by my brother before I got a chance to take a photograph of it. So it was actually a little bit down the log a little further with the heavy burnt side down. And where it was on top of the log wasn't burnt there at all. So without a doubt, the two stumps and long log made the X. I was reading something on Terry Scant where Forrest was talking about, when you're in the spot or something, if you cross the lines, you'll know that you're there. And without a doubt, I mean, if you take the log and make a line, and you take the stumps and make a line, it marks an X. I think it was Gotti Swartz that did an interview. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that's who it was way early on. And he come out of like a personal interview with Forrest, and then he went to his camera crew, and he said to the camera that, that Forrest didn't say this, but he goes, I'm 100% positive that Forrest marked a spot with an X. So with knowing that, so at that point, the only thing to do after that was the poem says to look quickly down for your quest to cease. Cease means to conquer or to put an end to. So my next trip out, I started digging underneath the X. Well, I dismantled the X. The blades doesn't exist no more. There's just no way digging underneath it with that being there, not safely, anyways. And that's the other part of if you're brave and in the wood, I give you title to the gold. And the brave part is that it was on a state park, which turns out to be BLM land, which I didn't know because I'm from the East Coast. We don't have the BLM here. And so it turns out to be federal property. So that's where the braveness comes in, because not everybody's going to be willing to dig there because there's consequences, and I'm dealing with that now. And where he says that the gold would be worth the cold, and the thing that's probably made the dig site the worst is that where the little brook comes in, that area where he hid the chest was originally like a pond area. So when you dig the dirt out, you're basically hitting water line. So, and it's freezing cold. It takes, I mean, literally it takes your breath away. You get in the water, you get in that water, even in the summertime, if it's there, it'll take your breath away if you like fall in it or whatnot, or you put your arm in too deep. My son actually laid on his belly the very first time we were there in the wintertime, and there was snow on the ground, and went the whole way around that big rock on his belly under the water, seeing if he could find a chest next to the rock. But of course, it wasn't there. It wasn't going to be that easy. So there's your cold. Be worth the cold. Being brave in the wood. Is underneath the blaze, which is made out of 2 stumps and a log. I think I pretty much covered each one of the 9 clues. And no place for the meek, I think, references what you're going to have to deal with when you get to the site with the digging. A lot of people say to me, how did an 80-year-old man bury it like that? And what people are not realizing is Forrest said that 15 years, I think it was 15 years after his cancer, that he hid the chest. And then he said again that after he hid the chest, it took another 10, 15 years for him to write the poem. So I think what ultimately he ended up putting the puzzle, I think he finished the puzzle when he was 80 years old with the X and everything there that I had to deal with, on top of the ground. So yeah, he found something there. In the book, he talks about Wyoming and the mudslide it takes over that whole town. And so a lot of people thought, well, maybe it's out in that area. But the clue there from the book is the mudslide, because ultimately is where I was digging at. It was a mudslide. And Forrest had found something that got caught up in the mudslide. And then, so when he was a younger man, probably in the 80s, I would say, that he found, I mean, straight to the point, Dead Man Jones. I think he found a trapper or a hunter or somebody that that was their livelihood back in the day, and they got caught in this mudslide, and he saw the barrel stick of the muzzleloader sticking up out of the ground, and that's what made him dig there. He had made a comment recently that there's only been like 4 things that he's ever seen that stuck up out of the ground, and he was talking about one, but he said he wouldn't talk about the other 3. So I'm positive that that was one of the objects he found sticking up out of the ground was the muzzleloader. So underneath the X, when I started digging there were some rocks, not gigantic rocks, just rocks about this size that you can just pick up and move. But underneath those little pile of rocks was what I call Santa Fe sand. It's orange, and then it didn't belong there. It was in the wintertime. The ground was frozen solid, like 18 inches of frost. The only place it wasn't frozen was where the Santa Fe sand was. So we scooped it out, and then and we're not being aggressive. We're not using no picks or nothing like that. We're basically using a hand in a bucket, and we're scraping this sand out. And then as we go down, we notice that we're in somebody else's dig site, and that you can see the pick marks. You know, you can see where the sun had whitened the clay, because that's what happens there. Once the clay is exposed, it'll start turning white. So you can see where it turned white from sun exposure. And as we're going down, there was these two spots where the sand fell out of these two holes. One was a straight line that went straight up through the ground, and you could see daylight, you know, at the top of the ground there, where he didn't disturb that part. He pulled the muzzle loader straight down out. And then the other hole was in a cone shape, kind of, I don't know, but it was about that long, and it went into a point, and it was curved. I didn't know what it was at first. It took me a couple of years to figure out what he found. And then I was watching Good Morning America, I think it was, or NBC, one of those shows. And he had showed the woman, you know, one of his prized possessions that was on his desk. And he handed her this brass or gold, I couldn't tell which it was. And it was pretty ornate. And it was a gunpowder horn. And as soon as I saw that gunpowder horn, I knew right where it came from. I knew the shape, the size, the length. You know, it was quite obvious to me that that's what he found there. And then you start thinking about gunpowder horn and muzzle loaders. People didn't leave those lay around in the 1800s. You know, without it, they're pretty much dead. That's what they had to hunt with and so forth and protect themselves. So then I started thinking about all the things that Forrest has said. Two people can keep a secret if one of them's dead. How many times have we all heard that? We've heard it hundreds of times, probably. It depends on how many times you watch them interviews, but I mean, that's his go-to. You know, when people ask him, does anybody else know where it's at? And then that's his go-to. You know, if two people keep a secret if one of them's dead. And then he said that he had hid the chest and wrote the poem in in some interviews, and then in another interview he said that when he was first writing the poem, that it stated, "Take the chest and leave my bones," and then the final cut came, you know, take the chest, look with marble gaze, Terry Scant, something like that, and go in peace, like rest in peace. So there's more there to see than just the chest. I mean, he's telling us that when he tells us look with marble gaze, you know, once you find a chest, you know that you found a chest, that that's what you expect to see, but there's more there. So the last 3 years I was digging, I was looking for a tomb. I wasn't looking for the individual chest. I never thought I was just going to dig in there, the chest was going to be. I am actively searching for a tomb. And the day that I got caught, the way a metal detector will work, if there's a rock in front of the signal, it'll make a dead spot, especially if it's in clay. So around the rock, I would get a good signal with my metal detector, and then right where the rock was, the rock would block it. So I was able to tell that about 2.5 feet wide, maybe about 2 feet high, maybe 2.5 feet high, something like that. It was pretty square shaped, but up on it's up on its edge, and behind that rock, the signal's coming out. The guys at Garrett guarantee me that there's metal there. They can't guarantee it's the chest, but I told them I had 4 different metal detectors there with multiple heads, they're all saying the same thing. The guys at Garrett guarantee me there's metal there. So yeah, so I know a lot of people get upset when I say I found it. People want me to sit and say, well, other things, but I can't downplay it. It is what it is. I know what I found digging the hole. That Santa Fe sand doesn't belong 3-hour drive away from where it originates from. The fact that somebody else had dug there, the fact that there's 2 items that were pulled out, and that's another clue, is it says hint of treasure new and old. So for anybody that has found the blaze, there has to be a hint of treasure old, because if there's not a hint of treasure old, then you're not in the right spot. I have a hint of treasure old. I have pictures of the hint of treasure old. So this doesn't need to be taken for my word. I mean, I showed some of these when I was doing with K-Pro, and I know I'm not going to say it right, but Calzauer or something, which was fun to do. But bear with me for a second. I just lost my spot. It'll come back to me here. What did I say? Just Cal. She said just call Cal. That works. David Plasano says, honestly, I think you are looking at an old dump site or wash that was filled in to stop erosion. That would be all right if I would have found more trash there. And even if it was a dump site, it doesn't explain the fact that somebody else had previously dug there with the pick marks, and then the fact that they pulled 2 items out of the clay. So yeah, there's definitely, I mean, there wasn't like cans or things like that were in there. There was a piece of old floor tile. And to tell you the truth, I think it came out of the building that Forrest tore down of his neighbor lady. We all seen interviews with Forrest when he's sitting in front of the pond. He likes to do interviews in front of the pond. Now that's not a natural pond, he dug it out, and I'm pretty sure I know where the dirt went, because with the Santa Fe sand that was in there, the burnt sand, there's burnt sand there. Towards the bottom layer, there is a layer of burnt sand. I mean, it's just what it is. It's sand that is burnt black, and there's charcoal throughout it. And it's at the bottom layer. It's on top of the bedrock. And everything that wasn't buried, the bedrock's just bedrock. You can see it there to the left. It comes down off the mountain. And so for there to be all that burnt sand there and with charcoal mixed through it, now for everybody that's seen how big the hole was, that was just due to me trying to figure out, where the best to dig. The water made it terrible. So, that sometimes makes the holes bigger. We'd had to, try to stop the water. It was not an easy dig. So it was very difficult, and we were very short timed. Every time we'd come out, people had to go back to work. So I'd only have 2 or 3 days each time I came out to dig. So that's why it took so many trips. If I would have lived in the area, it would have been a different story, but unfortunately I didn't. So I had to travel a lot. Anon, the biggest issue I have is the blaze is not feasible to remove. Actually, I just read that the other day. Forrest said that the blaze is feasible to move, but he don't think that it would be moved. Which on hindsight, maybe if I would have left the X there and dug underneath it, which I probably could have done and just had to be careful, I probably would have done a lot less digging, because I would have had that spot of the X. Okay, I'm reading Captain Obseeks. I'm reading Captain Ahab Seeks, and it says something about 18 feet. I'm not quite sure.
I think he was replying.
Okay.
Anonymous.
And I see David Piasno said those logs would certainly last 100 years. Yeah, I mean they would have lasted for that long. They were solid. They weren't dry rotted. The stumps definitely. The stumps were solid. Uh, the one stump, you can see where the ends were cut off, and it was just the tips that was holding the log up that was burnt. The other parts of the logs, the stump wasn't burnt. And if you look at the stump closely, the one that's underneath that had the burnt fingers, I call it, you can see where there's still Santa Fe sand stuck to the roots with a small rock. So there's absolutely no doubt, 100%. You can ask a geologist that that stump did not come from that area because the fact that the Santa Fe sand is stuck in the roots. It came from the desert area, and as you go up from Santa Fe to the Chama area, the terrain changes drastically. I mean, it's beautiful. It's amazing. It's a anybody ever get a chance to be in that area, you have to go up that. You got to go up towards Chama, and you've got to experience. You go past Ghost Ranch, where there's a lot of movies that's been done because of the train and stuff that's there, and there's an amphitheater that's naturally made. It's up through that way. Uh, definitely. If you live in New Mexico area, you've never been up that way, you got to go because it's beautiful. Uh, Now, Captain Abe Seeks says, "Do you believe it is 8 feet, 18 feet deep?" Captain, if you don't mind my asking you, where do you get the number 18? I see a lot of number 12, but it depends where you're taking your measurement from, because the blaze was halfway down the hillside. And if you're taking your measurement from the blaze down, you're looking at about 12, 13 feet. If you're taking it from the very top down to the bottom, you might be close to 18 feet. So it would depend on where you're measuring from. But if you're measuring from the very top, it would be pretty close to 18 feet.
Robert wants to know if you remember we heard about the gunpowder horn.
Robert wants to know, do you remember where you heard Saul Forrest talk about the gunpowder horn he found? It was when Forrest was doing the interviews. I think it was Good Morning America. I'm not sure which one is it with NBC. It was an NBC morning show, and they were doing a series where Forrest is going to give one clue like a month for 9 clues or something like that. And one of the women that was in the broadcast, the reporter, she was in his office looking at his stuff, and she wasn't interested in looking at his desk and then the gunpowder horn. He took it upon himself to go there and pull it off his desk to show her, because she was more interested in stuff that was on the walls and stuff like that. So he purposely did it. It's hard to find the video, I know, because I wanted to re-get it for a documentary I want to do. But you just gotta find it. It's there. I have a still picture of it, of the gunpowder horn, but I don't know what I would run into with copyright if I would show the picture. So because it's off of NBC. So, but yeah, you just gotta look for it. You gotta look for those NBC interviews or clues, and then it'll be amongst there. It'll be one of the first couple interviews that he did. Did you use the thrill of the chase to help with the solve? You mean the book? Yeah, I mean, I use some of the book to help, not so much with the solve, but with confirmation. There we go. The books, all three of the books, there's different parts in it that give you confirmation. So if you're sitting in my shoes and you know where it's at and you just can't dig it out because of the difficulty of the situation, as you're going through the book, there's stuff that pops out at you that you know that that's what he's talking about, or even on a TV interview. That's why I'm here today, because I want people to ask me those questions. I want people to ask me, well, Forrest said this, that it's above 5,000 feet in elevation. And then I could say, yes, this is the elevation of where I'm digging. So, and he says it's under like 10,200 feet, I believe it is. But when Forrest gave that clue, and I think it was on the NBC morning show, he said he was going to give the clue, and he started out by saying 7. He was like, the treasure's at 7, and then he's like, no, 5,000 feet. Now, we've all done our little white lies, and we tripped up on accidentally saying what we really knew to be the truth, and then we caught ourselves. And that's exactly what he did there. And the elevation where I'm digging at 7,146 feet. So, when I heard that, I got a big smile on my face because I know the elevation. And then yeah. And so give me these questions, and then I want people not just to get on my comments or my site and sit and say mean or bad things or belittle me. It's like, now here's your chance. Here's your chance to question me, interrogate me if you want, or however you want to look at it. I'll answer your questions. I'm putting it all out there. I mean, my chase is over. It's ruined. I can't dig no more. The feds don't want to dig because I know that one of the guys that's in charge hates treasure hunters. And so for him to dig and find a treasure would be the exact opposite of what he wants. He hates us. He hates treasure hunters. You can go to his Facebook page. It'll show you. But yeah, give me the hard question. Robert said about, what do you think about his comment that no specialized tools were needed, i.e. metal detector? Robert, you're right. I would have been better off leaving the metal detector at home, because what I didn't know at the beginning of all this is that blue clay has a characteristic that takes frequencies from your metal detector and amplifies it. So something that's metal that's deeper down or further away, it'll pick it up, and you'll pick it up wherever that blue clay's at. So if you got a pile of blue clay that's 8 feet in diameter and there's a piece of metal in the center, you're going to pick that signal up off that blue clay anywhere in that 8-foot diameter. And so that's what threw me a lot, because I'd pick up a clearer signal over here because there was more blue clay. So I'd start digging over here, and then and then it'd be like, I get down. And then once I learned that the blue clay amplifies the frequency, that's when I learned how to read the rocks. And I cut, instead of like digging around, I just dug a big trench and then worked my way in. And that's how I was able to finally narrow the signal down to where I knew that I was within a few feet. Now with Forrest had said in one of his interviews that as he was walking back to the car, I'm hoping I'm not getting too all mixed up, but it was something as he walked back towards his car, he got a funny grin on his face because he's like, did I just do that? Did I just make my shiny castle? So you don't hear a lot about that. K Pro, do you know what I'm talking about? Have you seen that? Uh, anyways, what I realized then is that towards the bottom of this, he took clay. He took there's 3 different layers of clay down there, uh, and he built a dome like this. I mean, you can literally, as you're digging, you're digging over here, and you get down to the bottom. There's less clay, and the closer you got to the middle, the thicker it got. And then you can see where also you had the clay like this, and then there was rocks that were like placed on top of the clay. So it made a dome. And so I believe that that's exactly this shiny castle that he's talking about, because if he did that, there's water there. Excuse me. There's water there. He has clay. I mean, I could just imagine him wetting that down, sealing everything off nice and smooth. And then he dumped the dirt on top of it. So there's no doubt that he made a tomb. And that goes back towards an interview or I don't know if it was an interview or if it was written down, but no, it was an interview. Someone asked him if it was buried or not. And he says, well, let's define buried. Is buried a sepulcher? Is buried a tomb? Or is buried underneath the earth? And then he volunteers going into what's a blaze? Is a blaze, is a blaze a trail marker? Is a blaze marking on a tree? Or is it a flame? So, right there, he said a lot in that one interview. He's telling you that, for one, it could be a flame, which it turns out to be the burnt wood. So then he's telling you how he buried it. He made a sepulcher, which would be like they put Jesus in, and then you put the rock in front of it. That's a sepulcher. A tomb is basically a sepulcher that is buried under dirt, because then you're entombing it. And so he did all that. He made a sepulcher, put Dead Man Jones in it, and he said the spot was very near and dear to him. That's why in the 3rd book he talks about Mummy Joe, and he regrets not knowing Mummy Joe was underneath his feet when he would go in that cave and sit. Because basically, he would have, his own conversation with Mummy Joe, I believe. And I think that's exactly what he would do when he would go to that spot. He was completely hidden. He knew Dead Man Jones was there. He built a sepulcher and put him in it. So I think he just chilled out there with them. And then when he decided to finally hide his treasure, he stuck it in the sepulcher with Dead Man Jones. And then he wrote the poem, and then he decided to entomb it and make the X. And so you really got to know and learn about Forrest to really get in his head to try to figure out what's going on. Let's see. Looks like a lot of people are leaving. The president's going to be talking here at 9 o'clock. I'm going to save this. It's a new channel. It'll be the only video on there. And then I'll do another one next week. You guys that came, there's not a lot of you, there's 8 of you, but if you want to come back, think of some good hard questions. Think of some interviews that he's done, and he's given some clues, and I will explain to my best what each clue means, and what I think his thought process was on each one. Because I do obviously believe I found it, and then that gives me an insight to a lot of what he does, because I'm standing there looking at some of these clues that he's talking about. And David asked me, does your solve have a floating hat? I can't say my solve has a floating hat, but my hats fell off in the water and floated while we were there working. If that helps you out any. All right, guys, I am going to go ahead and end this. I want to watch the president speak myself. As I say, where we go one, we go all. Everybody have a good night. Thank you.